We're recording. We also need a YouTube site for these.
That will be our recordings will be,
Yeah.
I'll just set up a Country Dog, City Dog YouTube channel.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So we'll have a podcast, a YouTube channel, and a radio station.
So, do you want to have any social media? Do you want to have like a Twitter or a Facebook or anything like that? Instagram?
Absolutely. I haven't done it yet, but I think the website will have like the little thumbnail tabs that you can click on Facebook, Twitter, and I think Facebook and Twitter are the two largest.
Right.
But if we want to do, I don't know if Snapchat would really be. It's not for us.
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't think Instagram either, because that's more just like little snap pictures.
Mm-hmm.
You got it.
That's okay.
All right. But Twitter and YouTube for sure. I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay. All right.
Alright, I'm gonna do a stopwatch on my phone instead of a timer. You good?
Yeah. Let me set mine too.
This will be a tough one.
Yeah. I don't really know a whole lot about unions. I mean, I like.
Oh, I'm not talking about anything about unions. Unions is not gonna come up once, like, in my conversation. I'm talking third parties, I'm talking like,
Oh, third-party politics. Right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know anything about,
Okay.
I don't know, I should say I don't know enough about unions to have a half-hour conversation on.
Not the timer. Stopwatch. Okay. Okay, so let me know when you're ready.
Ready?
Go. Okay. Okay, this is episode 4, Country Dog, City Dog, in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Country Dog, City Dog. My name is Kevin Levy,
My name is Don Merrill.
and thank you so much for tuning in and hearing our next podcast and radio show. And what we're going to talk about now is the advantages, or some might say, the disadvantages of a third-party candidates. And how can having third-party candidates help to heal a divide? How can bringing in more voices on the same subject matter help to unify people?
You know, the United States has a history with third-party candidates, but it's not a smooth history. The third-party candidate in recent history that had the most influence on the American political election was Ross Perot. Ross Perot came in, I think during the Clinton candidacy, between Clinton and
That's
Bush,
correct.
and Ross Perot was in there. And everybody remembers Ross Perot for him saying that huge sucking sound you hear is Mexico pulling jobs out of the United States.
I voted for us.
And a lot of people did vote for Ross Perot because a lot of people could see that opening up the American labor market to a global economy was only going to hurt American producers. It would help American consumers, but hurt American producers. And the fact that the United States has sort of pulled back on some of its global relationships, and the fact that a lot of American companies have moved back to the United States, you know, after they've had this 20 or 30-year experiment, kind of shows that, you know, there may be some benefit in having domestic companies that produce domestic things for the domestic consumer.
Right. Did you know that right now there are more registered, unaffiliated voters than there are Republicans or Democrats in the state of Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, for whatever reason, whenever elections come, every election cycle, we get, I don't want to say suckered into, but we get stuck into voting either for a Republican or a Democrat. And getting opposing parties elected seems to be a very common fear. But what we're doing right now is, I'm just seeing this hatred of this is like the divide of the Republican and the Democratic divide, and all we are doing is playing into it by always having a two-party system, and we're not allowing a free and easy system where third-party candidates, and I'm not talking only 3, it could be 4, 5, or 6, but a multiple party system to be the commonplace in our election cycles.
You know, Americans hate traffic circles. And the reason why they hate traffic circles is because they consider traffic circles really European. Americans like, you know, four-way stops with traffic lights and stop signs. They don't like circles. They don't like roundabouts. And they also don't like proportional representation. They don't like for instance, Portland just changed its government structure so that now you're going to have sort of a version of proportional representation where, you know, you vote for the top candidates, and the candidates who don't reach a certain threshold, they drop out, and then their votes go to the next highest one. A lot of people don't like that because they say, you know, it's not the American first past the post type of election. You know, we're a very competitive country, you know, and we believe that the strongest should be the ones who win. And when you have something like proportional representation or something that sort of divides up how people get to choose their leaders, then it seems to, you know, it doesn't seem like it's all 100% American.
Yeah, but we have the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Independent Party, the Working Families Party, the Reform Party, the Constitution Party. There are over 50 parties here in the United States, yet we always seem to go back just to these two. And myself, I am an independent. I'm a registered independent. I have voted for Republicans, Independents, Democrats, Green Party. There are so many. The candidate has to resonate with me, regardless of the political party that they follow. If they resonate, then they have my vote. I feel we should not just be stuck inside a two-party system. There's so much more to it. I hear what you're saying, but I'm telling you, like, I feel this is the crux of our divide right here.
Well, see, I think that the problem with, I'm not saying there's a problem, okay, I won't say there's a problem, but what my thought wasn't finished on what I was saying before, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, people they like the idea that, you know, you choose one candidate or the other, and they like it so much that the states have, in some cases, structured voter registration around the fact that if you're not registered as a Democrat or as a Republican, you can't vote in the primary. You know, you can vote, I mean, you can vote in the primary, but you can't vote in the general election. Like, you have to be registered. The parties have sort of made it so that, in some states, I know in Utah for sure this was the case, you had to be registered either as a Democrat or a Republican, and once you were registered, you could not vote, you know, in the primary as it affected the other party, if I have it right.
Yeah, I think that's a failure towards the people.
So what happens is, you know, the structure, the system itself is structured in such a way to where independent parties and independent candidates don't really have a fair hearing, a fair say. And you're right, there are so many, the Pacific Green Party, there's the Constitutional Party, there's the Libertarian Party, there are all of these parties, you know, but the track record of these parties, as they stack up in the general election, it's minuscule, you know, and it's because they don't really get a chance to be, like, even in political debates, in order for a lot of these parties to be even considered for political debates, they have to get a certain percentage of the vote, like 5%, or their campaign donations have to be like 5% of something. And a lot of times, because they can't get news media coverage, they don't get the attention of the public, and so they don't hit that 5% threshold. Yeah. So then they don't get interviewed by the Oregonian, they don't get interviewed by OPP, you know, and so then people don't know about them.
Yeah, they're not given a platform to share their ideas, and there was a debate, I believe it was a couple Oregon races, governor races ago, when it was Kate Brown, Nupular, and was it Patrick Starnes? Was that his name? And they were all on the debate stage, but the announcer went, and by the way, this was a question and response. The audience was allowed to ask questions to the candidates, and the candidates would respond. But I spoke with Patrick before, and he was mentioning that before the airtime was to begin, the the audience was not allowed to ask the Independent Party of Oregon, the IPO candidates, direct questions. They were only allowed to ask questions directly to the Republican and Democrat, and right there, that was a huge problem. But you know what? I feel a new system, a new voting system needs to be put in place to allow third-party candidates to have a stronger voice. And here's what it is: ranked choice or star voting. Those are voting systems that will help elect third-party candidates without there being a spoiler effect. Imagine if you see this amazing candidate that resonates with everything that you believe in, but that candidate for, like, he's part of, just for example, the Working Families Party. Without ranked choice or star voting, you might be throwing away your votes, and then potentially, like, the worst of the worst candidate can be elected. I feel with either ranked choice or star voting, it is now creating an even playing field where we could bring in other third-party candidates to share their voice without people feeling like they're throwing away their vote or potentially getting the wrong person elected.
Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts about that. First, people are very practical when they vote. They tend to be practical because they don't want to throw away their vote because they know they've only got one. And so I think that what happens is people look at the candidates and they say, you can either vote your conscience or you can vote your beliefs, you know, which for a lot of people comes down to, you know, do I believe I'm going to have, you know, gas in my car? Do I believe I'm going to have food in my refrigerator? And I always think of Ralph Nader.
Right.
Ralph Nader's run for president. And how Ralph Nader was blamed for not George Bush, but for the first Bush getting into office because he...
No, I believe it was George W.
Was it George W? Okay.
Yeah.
How he was blamed for helping George W. get into office by drawing votes away from the other candidate. And, you know, he was very unapologetic. He was like, you know, people vote according to who they consider the best candidate is. If I remember, he said something similar to this. And he was like, you know, I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I had the right to run and I ran. But, you know, considering the direction that the country took after that, I think that, you know, people's view of third-party candidates sort of changed. And you could see it in the last election for governor here in the state. It's like people thought that the reason that Betsy Johnson being in the race was going to draw votes away from one candidate in favor of the other, you know. A lot of people thought that Betsy Johnson was a spoiler.
Sure.
So, you know, it's really, you know, this whole idea of you know, voting your conscience for the party that you ideologically are most connected to versus voting for the bread and butter issues, the economic issues, you know, that are best for you and your family. It's always a hard decision. And getting back to Patrick Starnes, you talked about Patrick Starnes for a second. I interviewed Patrick Starnes too last year, as part of the candidate interview project that me and my reporting partner have. And Patrick Starnes was registered on the Secretary of State's website as not only as a member of the Working Family Party, but also as a Democrat. And that's what happens a lot of times. A lot of times candidates will claim more than one party because it increases their exposure.
Sure.
And it increases their chances of being picked up or endorsed by, you know, their party, by the party that they claim, by one of the parties that they claim. So I think that, you know, the third party candidate, and really this is really all about how third party candidates affect people in rural versus urban environments, but the third party candidate a lot of times does everything they can to be as attractive as they can to both people in the rural and the urban environments.
Yep. Yeah, so you brought up two candidates, Ralph Nader and Betsy Johnson. If we had a voting system like star voting or like ranked choice voting, there would not have been, Betsy Johnson potentially could have won this election because so many people did not want to vote for Betsy because they would have felt that it was taking their vote away from either the Republican or the Democrat.
Right, either Christine Drazan or Tina Kotek.
Exactly. And Ralph, if a new voting system was nationwide when Ralph Nader, he might have been elected, and so.
And Ross Perot could have been elected.
Exactly, and so first I want to jump in and say, listeners, if you want to learn more about these two systems, go and Google star voting and Google ranked choice voting. They're both new platforms they're actually being implemented throughout multiple states and mostly throughout counties as opposed to the entire state.
As well as Portland.
Yes, and so please check into those, and if you like what they're doing and how you can no longer have a spoiler effect, then contact your representative and demand that they put in a new voting system such as, again, ranked choice or star voting, two powerful platforms.
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than telling your legislator to put it in. I think it probably
needs to
turns
be on
into
the
a
ballots.
ballot measure,
Absolutely,
right? Absolutely,
yes.
which means you have to get votes, which means you have to get signatures,
People,
which means
do it. Go out there, get that ballot measure. This is the biggest thing that will heal the divide. When we are now able to vote like comfortably, this is going to heal a divide that will just exponentially just be such a great thing.
when you talk about being able to vote comfortably for who? Because there's a lot of people who benefit from the binary choice that we have. There's a lot of people who benefit from the fact of making sure that people stay in their boxes.
That's what's dividing us. That right there is what is the divide. That's how I see it. Is people, what you just said, people staying in their boxes. Like, if you're not in this box and you're in that circle right there, like, keep it going, keep them divided when we are not united.
But when we're talking about the urban-rural divide, there may be people who are very devoted to those boxes. I mean,
Are they devoted, or do they just not know any better?
Well, what's the difference? So I guess let me ask you, so then how would you go about getting people from rural communities and people from urban communities to agree that we need to change the voting structure so that it benefits both communities?
Great question. Education on what it's about and how it can benefit them. Because right now, I mean, you're in a rural part of Oregon, and I don't know how much those two voting systems have been presented to your community, but I know here in Portland, a lot of people are talking about it, and I feel the more people talk about it and explain it, and it allows me to understand it better. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I would be in favor of that, and I'm an independent. I'm not all about that Democratic politician, and they automatically have my vote. By no means. I just want there to be other options to allow people to have.
And I think that having as many options as possible is also a good thing, because I've watched what both parties have done in the name of democracy. And, whether it was, the Republican Party embracing the divisive politics of our former president, or whether, and a lot of people disagree with